Oh, I got that. Just need to get them out. Make the rest of it easier. We can start they did. We went through. I think so. Last item. That would be sneaking in.
Oh, yeah, they did. I'm late. It's all the class.
Would you like
No.
Sure. Are we recording? All right, hello, everybody. Let's call this meeting to order. This is the October 19th, 2023 meeting, regular meeting of the City of Harbor Springs Planning Commission. We're broadcasting and recording as per usual. And let's start with the roll call. Oh, Jeff jumped out for a minute. Here he comes now. Roll call. Roll call.
I was gonna do it. Rick Bertinsky.
Rick, you're here, right?
Yes.
Emily Day.
Here.
Bob Thoma. Here. Bill Mulder. Here. Mark Today. Here. Barry Leskar.
Here.
We have a forum.
Great. Want to thank Mark Boudet for racing on a cross-country drive to be here tonight
racing across the Badlands, the Northern Plains, bad weather, good weather, because he wanted to do a good job. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And all right, first thing on the agenda is approval of minutes. Anyone care to make a motion? Or do you have any corrections or additions to the minutes from next meeting?
So moved.
There's a motion to approve the minutes as written. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Minutes are approved as submitted. Okay, next thing on the agenda is public comment and correspondence. And for those who don't come to a lot of planning commission meetings, which I think is most of the audience, I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. So the people you see before you here are residents like you, volunteers who have, are interested in serving you on this commission. And it's a good group. We don't agree. We don't always agree. Sometimes we rarely agree, but we've got a good dynamic and respect each other. And we're here to do the very best that we can for our residents. The folks you see at the table are our city manager, Victor Sinadinowski, Jeff Grimm, who's our zoning administrator and assessor, Jim Raymer, who's our attorney, city attorney, and has a business outside of the city, and John Icoangeli from Beckett and Rader, our contract planning firm out of Ann Arbor and Petoskey. So that's who you have before you. And this part of the agenda is where people can comment about things that are not on the agenda. Tonight, there's not a lot not on the agenda. We have quite a formidable meeting in front of us. So is there anyone who would like to offer advice, ideas, criticism, anything about a topic that's not on tonight's agenda? Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. And there's no one raising their. No.
Oh, that's right. If anyone is on Zoom, please raise your Zoom hand and we'll unmute you to speak.
These are two members who could not attend in person tonight. One's on a different continent and one's in a different city, but they cared enough to come in remotely to participate. So that's good. All right. So the agenda we have tonight, we have a number of technical things and some carryover things that are very important to residents, and about their property, how to use their property, what they can do and what they can't do. But my sense is, looking at this audience, that maybe a lot of people are here in relation to the vegetation management discussion. Would you care to raise your hand if that's your area of interest tonight? Looks like majority. And so, planning commissioners, let me ask you, would you be in favor of moving that issue to the first position? Yes, so that we can respect the time of our residents. Yeah, Kevin, a sense, Barry?
Yes.
Rick? Rick? You think, okay, Bob. All right. Looks like we're gonna do that, so. Great news, and then
Greg will have to stay though as the representative of that group.
for the very end. Good. Okay, let's talk about the idea of vegetation management on the bluff. Victor, would you like to set this up for us?
I guess, sure. We received a.
Oh, wait, and for everybody, there will be a chance to comment regarding this issue specifically after Victor presents.
So as I understand, we received a public comment or an email from several residents on Third Street who took issue with, I would say, a tree cutting job on a property on the bluff that's near their homes. And they submitted a request to the city planning commission to consider enacting some sort of ordinance that would regulate tree removal on bluff property, mostly related to, mostly with concerns to bluff stability, as well as some other issues. So from my understanding, the planning commission briefly talked about this, or it came up at the previous planning commission meeting, and the planning commission decided to put this as a topic on the agenda for today. This is not meant to be a public hearing about it. It's just meant to be a general discussion. So zoning administrator Jeff Grimm asked me to write a memo, and I provided that memo to you. And it's in your packet about this issue. As you know, we do have a public, we do have I guess I call it a policy, but it's really a process for individuals to request, trimming on the bluff or cutting up trees on the bluff on public land, of course. So we do allow that as city property. So we do have a process for that. And of course, there's been several decades of ongoing differences between people above the bluff and below the bluff on, what should be trimmed, about bluff stability, et cetera. So we do have that process, but this would be something totally different. It would be regulation of private property. I highlighted 3 concerns that I've gleaned from the email that we received, as well as from previous concerns. And one is about bluff stability. The other is about aesthetics, and another is about the tree canopy. So we have concerns about whether or not removal of or clear cutting of bluff property would cause damage to the bluff and potentially cause it to erode. We have concerns about the aesthetics of completely removing trees off the bluff and what that does to the character of the area. And then we also have concerns about removing tree canopy and when clear cutting properties, how that affects their overall tree. We've had conversations back and forth with consultants and experts, and some of the things that I've heard and discussed was regarding the stability of the bluff is do removal of tall trees, cause bluff concerns on the bluff with stability and erosion. From my sense, and I'm not the expert, but from those that I've talked to, that it's really a problem of surface erosion on the bluff, and the surface erosion, that soil is held together by shallow rooted plants, and these tall trees are more of deep rooted plants. And the concern we have on our bluff is more of a shallow rooted plants. And so one of the questions is, if we're trying to solve bluff stability, is regulating for tree removal the best way to ensure bluff stability, or are there other ways? Is there managing water, managing wind? And vegetation is certainly part of it, but is it the only part of it? And so that question I can't answer to what degree, but I do know that it's not just about whether there's mature trees, but there needs to be understory as well, that shallow rooted plants keep that surface soil together. When you have problems like we saw on M119 here on the west part where there's that washout, that's more due to a water issue with no curbing there for the water to go anywhere. So, but at the flip side of that, MDOT doesn't want any disturbance on the bluff, because their experts say that any disturbance of the bluff, removal of trees will cause erosion and problems. So there's conflicting viewpoints on that, and my advice to the planning commission would be, if you really think there's an issue with bluff stability, or you want to prevent an issue of eroding the bluff, that you would consult some sort of experts that could give us advice on what is the problem and what's the proper solution to it. Aesthetics is a different concern. That's more of a subjective point of view. Some people, may like to see a lot of trees, some people may not. Character of the area, again, that's more of a subjective point of view. So I don't really have any advice on that. Other than that, we do mention character of the area in the planning, the master plan, something to consider, and whether or not we consider forested or heavily treed lots character of the area or not, that's up to the planning commission. Then tree canopy, we do have, of course, language in our tree plan and the master plan that talks about trees and the need for having a tree canopy. And there is concern that if we allow the clear cutting of lots on the bluff or not, that we would, reduced amount of tree canopy in the city, which could, have potentially some environmental and health benefits. However, my opinion and my recommendation is if we're looking at it just from the tree canopy perspective, that you shouldn't be just looking at the bluff side properties. It should be a citywide issue when it comes to trees, because bluff side trees, loss of canopy there is the same as loss of canopy elsewhere. So from my understanding, based on the memo, the email from the Third Street residents, the main concern is the bluff stability. And I think that's where the focus is, because they're right below the bluff and they're worried about the land eroding onto their backyards and the properties. So that's That is the main concern. But these other two topics were brought up. I also listed in this memo the master plan goals. I'm not gonna read them all out, but I have them there for you that refer to, protecting blocks, protecting our views, and et cetera. So you have all those there. I think that is really important to consider because that is the planning commission's, one of their first primary jobs is to ensure that the zoning codes that we enact ordinance are in line with the master plan. So, of course, I know residents from Third Street are here, and if they want to speak on behalf of their request, they can. I was paraphrasing what was requested, trying to summarize that. My only recommendation, my main recommendation is if we believe there is a concern with bluff's ability, that we should consult an expert to analyze that further. Because I don't think we have all the information here to be able to make any decision on that.
Great. Why don't we have a little bit of discussion with the planning commissioner, questions to Victor, Jeff, and others, and then we figure out the public. Anybody have any questions for Victor?
Hey, Victor,
Yeah, when was the last time a study was done for the bluff stability? Has the city ever performed?
not an entire bluff. I know there was expert consultants consulted for the West Bluff, and that was a while ago, I believe. And we've regularly consulted with our city arborist on his views. Of course, he's not an expert in that, but he does know a lot about how trees hold the surface together. But I don't think we have a full scope. And I don't know, Jim, if you have any recollection from your time being here, if we've ever done a study. A full study. I know there's been part.
No, I don't believe there's ever been an expert engaged to study that, or engineers to study it.
Yeah.
Soil engineers. I mean, it would take a comprehensive study, I would say, to determine what action, if any, should ever be taken by the municipality.
And Victor, could you clarify again what the planning commission's role in all this would be?
Well, when it comes to regulating private property, that's what zoning code usually comes in when you regulate use. And since we're talking about specific sections of town, it may be, and Jim could probably allude to this a little bit more, but we're talking about certain potentially zoning districts or potential uses of property that we need to regulate. This is not just an ordinance like we have for regulating tree removal on public property. It's on private property. So the planning commission would be considering potentially, if this is something they're interested in, is some sort of regulation for tree removal on the bluff. And that would require, in my mind, some approval or review by the planning commission before it goes to city council. Jim, I don't know if you think differently on that, but that's my.
No, I think my view on this historically has been to put the planning commission into a position of having to decide whether a particular property could have tree trimming done on it would be an impossible job, because there would be engineers, arguments about whether it should or should not be done. And I just don't think the planning commission is is qualified, if you will, to make that kind of decision. So, or would want to.
Property by property, you're saying, or?
Yeah, that's the way it would be.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about getting some input from the public at this point? Have a motion for that?
There's no.
We don't need
You need a motion.
It's not a public
We don't
hearing,
need a
so we don't need a
Yeah.
motion for that.
Good. All right. Members of the public, the rules for this part are that you can introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes to tell us what we need to know crisply. And that's what we've learned, is that tighter the better. And why don't we start with some folks from Third Street who started. That'd be all right.
I think that would probably be
Anybody
me.
care to speak on that? Okay, John.
Yeah, I'm John Wayman on 483 East Third Street. Let me tell you what my request is not about, and it's not about stopping trimming for view. What my request is about is stability of the bluff, and some things you may not know. Expert, I think there's an issue of expert in tree plantings and so on. I've been told, and I don't know if this is currently the case, that there is an expert available who does this with the Conservancy. Who's very familiar with plantings and bluffs for stability and so on. With regard to East Third Street, the Linsleys are here and had an experience with a bluff stability issue where their basement ended up getting filled with sand, and they can probably tell you about that themselves. On East Bluff, there's been a purchase of property below and significant cutting of trees, which it appears as though is going to reduce the stability of the bluff. And if you, in the winter time, if you come on East Third Street and look at the property between our house, which is 483 East Third Street, east of that to the Rackwoods, you'll see that the plane of the soil increases a bit, or more than a bit actually, behind the Rockwoods house. And in the wintertime, when the leaves are down, you'll see a trough of at one time there was a slump in the bluff. Just so happens it appears as though that's at a low point of the street above. Further east, and I don't know, again, you'll have to wait for the leaves to come down. You'll see high on the bluff, there appears to be a structure higher on the bluff that appears to have been intended to hold back a portion of the bluff, or maybe possibly to supply support for something above it. I really don't know. Below the bluff, the former owner on our house told us that they had to regrade their property because of a flood that came down the bluff. I know we have picked up erosion materials from the bluff, including some antique things like antique bottles and what I understood to be a portion of an old bridle from some form of horse-drawn carriage and so on. So it's happening. And the West Bluff and what's happened east of us on 119 tells me that if those issues are cropping up and we're now dealing with something that may be 50, 100 years from now, that somebody's got to look at the stability of the bluff and decide what to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. All right, anyone else from Third Street like to comment at this point? Yes, sir, in the back. Sorry, I'm involved. Okay. Right.
Fred Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. I agree with everything that John said. Our home is just 2 lots east of them. But the part of it, in addition, that bothers me is a lot that was cleared recently. Is that it literally was cleared. It was clear cut. I think that's certainly beyond reasonable. It's not trimming anymore. I mean, I agree with the concept of tree trimming, including for views within reason. But to get a view by completely clear cutting piece of property that is in total public view, except for the people on the top of the bluff, they don't see it. I think it needs to be controlled.
Thank you. All right. Bill.
We had a place on 485 West Third. West 40. It's called the Harvard House. And to the east of there's a trail. It's down below and there's the school. So back. It became very, very fragile and rain. So yeah, every rainstorm. Yeah, I used to do mud pavement. But yeah, some kind of.
It was actually so bad, the city came, actually, much appreciative. The whole driveway was full of sand.
our whole lower level of the basement was full of sand. This was on 4th Street. This was in the 90s, late 90s. And because of this path that Bill was talking about that came down, it just created a stream down there. And it was a mess. So to go back to the thought that having vegetation there to prevent that probably would have prevented that.
Thank you. All right, would anyone else like to have your comments recorded? Anyone from any street? Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Okay, this is really my name is Bill Donnie, 277 East Bluff Drive, right next to the high school. As I read all this, it sounded sort of like a solution searching for a problem. And the issue that I have, other than I like my trees, I've never cut one down, but I trimmed them. And this I'd ask Jim this, if you enacted this, would this amount to be a taking? Because I own the property halfway down the bluff and have cutting rights all the way to the bottom. I paid for them, they're on my deeds, plus I have cutting rights in front of the high school. So would this pass muster in a court?
Well, I would want to study that, but the takings issue is real. Something we would have to consider if you're going to impose restrictions on a person's property. That's just a matter of course.
We cause massive restriction on personal property every day with every law we raise. These people are here to talk about what they can and can't do with a piece of property they own. And we're going to tell them what they can do tonight. It's not their, they don't have that right. We've taken that right away from them. We're going to decide what they get to build on their property, or if they're going to get to build. I don't believe that it's a taking.
Well, I think mostly from what Victor was saying, if we were to make a decision.
So you know what, we're still in public comment, so
Yep.
let's come back to that point, it's an important one.
And this lies the.
Peggy, would you like to say?
Yes, 315 East 3rd Street.
Can you-
So I am on 3rd Street and I've been there for over 10 years. I've seen that it's a living bluff. No matter what you do, there is going to be change that's going to take place and you have to watch it as a property owner. I've worked with the folks above me that had cutting rights or trimming rights. It was a conversation I was able to have with them. It was a neighborly conversation. I understand that one bad apple makes it, kills it for everybody, what took place. And, but this lies the problem that if you guys start deciding what trees we can or what plants we can put in, then it goes down to what type of roof material we're going to be putting on our houses, what color we're going to color our houses. This is really dangerous in my eyes. And I understand because I live on 3rd Street of what the damages that can be had. But, I think that we really need to have both the Bluff neighborhood and 3rd Street to really have empathy for each other, because we all like to see the views when we drive the bluff or walk the bluff. You like to see the contrast. You have some places, people that have the trees, they trim the branches, and you have those that just top the trees. So there's a give and take, but I really think that if you start deciding what dimension of a tree I can have, or that I can't plant a certain plant on my property, this is crazy. Then why own property? This is just, we're just going way too far here.
Thank you, Peggy.
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East 3rd Street. I understand the slippery slope concept of this, but we already have
Good pun.
we already have regulations down below as to how far we can go back on our property to build a house. I can't build into the bluff from below And so we've already kind of taken that step.
It's very different than a tree though.
Okay.
It's very different than that abstract viewpoint. You know, a wall is very different than trees and plants. That's,
Okay,
I just want to remind everybody that comments should be directed to the planning commission. We shouldn't be having conversations back and forth between each other. Sorry.
but I took both those points there.
Hi,
Yes, ma'am.
Leona Davis, I'm at 325 East Third. I think most people know that my full-time residence is in Austin, Texas, and we do have tree regulations in Austin. And I operate a permit service, and so I'm really familiar with the argument around what you can do and what you cannot do with your trees. The only thing that I want to address specifically, and I don't know that everybody's looking at this, when you talk about bluff stability, you're not talking about whether a tree is trimmed and that affects the stability. You're not even talking about if a tree is removed, lopped off, and that affects stability. What affects stability is when you disturb the root system. Because the roots are what's holding everything back, whether it's grass, whether it's shrub, whether it's tree, it's the roots that are stabilizing the bluff. So cutting the trees is not affecting stabilization of the bluff. You can check me out on that, speak to an arborist if I'm wrong, happy to hear it. But I do have a little bit of experience with this. So as long as, I mean, and it's sad that they did what they did. That clear cut is ugly. And if I live next door to that, I'd probably be upset about that too. But I don't believe the bluff is mightily compromised by that because the stumps are still there. It's too bad there couldn't have been a conversation before that happened, and maybe there should be something just addresses that type of cutting. But I don't know that regulating trees as a whole, the entirety of the bluff, is the right approach. And that's all I have to say about that.
Vince Mahalik, 475 East Bluff Drive. First of all, I think you can have both. You can have a tree canopy and a view. I have 5 beautiful oak trees across from my property and a great view of the water, so I'm not concerned about that per se. But I would like to read the minutes from the last tree committee because it reinforces just what she said. Dealing, by the way, is the city arborist. If you don't know Ben is the city arborist. He's actually told me this when I talked to him about cutting trees or trimming trees on my property. He stated that removing trees from the bluff likely does not significantly impact bluff stability unless the stumps are grinded and the roots removed. A certain percentage of the stumps will create shoots and new plants will sprout as roots decay, thus replenishing the bluff with vegetation. Shallow rooted plants are also better at keeping the sandy soil intact on the bluff compared to deep rooted trees. Finally, taller trees prevent the growth of the understory, which can create erosion issues. Thus, removing larger trees can sometimes be beneficial. Billing thinks solving the bluff stability issues are more about managing water flow and dealing with the wind's effects. However, Billing said there are non-bluff stability questions that may be important to consider, such as the loss of canopy, carbon capture, and aesthetics. So essentially, he's reinforcing what she said. You can cut big trees, you can cut them down. It's the roots that actually hold the sandy soil. And Ben went on to tell me that if I do remove trees, to plant back something that at least smaller trees or smaller bushes to keep the sandy soil in place. So I would like to recommend to you to vote no on this proposal because I don't think it really addresses the key issue.
Thank you. Any other input for us?
I could just add to that, the replant in Austin, they consider that mitigation, and there's actually a committee that goes around and looks at this and decides this, city arborist, whatever. And if there is a tree that's been removed that is somewhat questionable, or if somebody wants to remove a tree and wants to decide, you know, what can we do to help with the situation, it's a mitigation factor. So you take out X caliber inches of trees, you replant X caliber of trees. And so it addresses again what this gentleman just addressed. If you take something down that's a larger, you plant something smaller, eventually you get that growth, it all comes back. It's all about what's in the ground, not what's above the ground. So,
Who makes that happen?
pardon me?
Who makes that happen?
Well, in Austin, it's so highly regulated, and I'm speaking directly to that. It's highly regulated, but it's also a huge court fight all the time. Everybody's in court constantly fighting over the trees. It makes no sense for everybody to dive into a bucket that it's not necessary to dive into here. If there could just be a conversation.
That would fall
and-
under some kind of an ordinance under
Well-
the city purview.
Well, if it had to go that far, but I think for the most part, there could be an understanding amongst the people that are living in this environment of now that it's actually hit a table for discussion, it might be a thing that could resolve itself rather than have to get
So we
any kind
depend
of
on,
legalities involved.
so the system depends on good nature.
Well, I would like to think that that's what this community is built on, yes.
That's what we're here discussing this because this community didn't do what you think.
Well, I think it appears that one landowner is something that offended and brought the thing to light.
But if you look at the bluff, it's been coming on for years. Every year, a few more trees, every year, a little better view.
Again, topping a tree and not just stabilizing the bluff, and I thought we were talking about just stabilizing the bluff, so.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Sharon Mahalik, 475 East Bluff, his better half. I want that in the record. Rob, to your point about trees on the bluff, where we live, that is where all the high school kids come for their team pictures, for their prom pictures, for their wedding pictures. I've had engagement pictures done in our garden with the view of the water. I have pictures from 1920, 1910 of our house and the bluff with no trees on the back. And that's because we were a sawmill town and they took the trees closest to it. So I think that the bluff, in my opinion, has gone through ebbs and flows over the years. And I think that to say, and I respect your opinion, but I differ with it, to say that slowly people are taking away more and more trees, I disagree. When we moved into our house in 2012, I had a very easy view of a beautiful sailboat called Concerto out in the harbor. And now I can't see it at all because of the growth. We've been working with the city, trying to trim trees in the setback. And I know that that's a different conversation, but that has been, because of regulation, a 2-year process. We're in the 2nd year and we're no closer to getting it done. So I ask you to please consider less regulation often is better in a small town. I believe good neighbors make good neighbors. We now have a situation with tree trimmers that they're almost impossible to get on the bluff because every time they're up there with saws, someone is calling the police. And it's making it challenging for them and challenging for us to get the work done. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. All right, any other thoughts from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Peg Gemmer, 675 East Bluff. Hi, Mark. I'm saying hi to Mark because he knows Richard Pitts did my bluff management plan in 2014 when I purchased my property at 675 East Bluff. And he went down and marked every tree on my property, all the way down to the property owner's third. With recommendations to take certain trees out, leave certain trees, allow the undergrowth, allow plant life underneath trees, get rid of the scrubby trees, get rid of the bad trees, because topping a tree is not good. It will eventually die. So the best thing you can do is remove the old tree, allow new growth. But if you ever walk in front of my house, I have 5 or 6 beautiful oak trees right on my Lake City property, but right across the street that are doing very well. But I keep them trimmed. I keep the branches off. Mrs. Irish, my next door neighbor, Dan Lockwood's here, my neighbors, he's done a very good job. But I would love to get down and get rid of some of the scrub. But I can't because I need permission and I was not granted permission. So they just don't allow us to grow. So, but it should not be a council rec, it should be allowed. That's the property owners that have to get together and agree.
Well, then Maggie, let's see if there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet. Then we can maybe have a second. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nancy Elliott. I'm at 515 East Bluff. And I'm the focus, I think, of everybody here. Because I did take the trees down in front and on Third Street. For good reasons, mainly it was the bluff, but the trees below were dead, half dead. It has not been taken care of in years. So that's why those trees came down. But I feel like, because of where I live, that I'm a steward of the view. And I love the idea that people coming down Arbor can take a look at the view. Here's what happens every day, from the morning until night. People are driving down Arbor, or they're walking, riding bikes, bicycles, or motorcycles. They get out of their car, walk over in front of the house, take videos, take pictures, sometimes sit down, spend a half an hour there. If they're on bikes, they stop, get off, enjoy the view. This is exactly what I wanted. I think the view is for everyone. I think we all live here because of this beautiful, spectacular bay. And being able to see it is a big deal. It was getting to the point where you couldn't see it. Everything was coming up from the bottom. It was all disappearing. And that's what happens when you don't maintain it. At one point, I thought I was done. Then my neighbor came up from below and said to the tree trimmer, "I'm worried these trees are going to fall in my house," which I can understand. We have had trees fall right over, right in front of my house. And so when he said that, he can't do anything about it. I own the property. So I did go in and take down the other two trees that he was mentioning, so that he didn't have to worry about them falling on his house. I know not everybody agrees with what I did, but it is a spectacular view. And I think it is a scenic view. I don't expect anybody else to do that because they don't have to. Now we have a place where everybody can stop right at those cross corners and enjoy that view. Weddings, Sharon's right, weddings are there. The prom kids are there, all kinds of things happen there. When it's 4th of July, they bring their chairs and their blankets, they lay them all out. Everybody spends the day there, or half the day there. It's for everybody. I feel like we all are doing what we think is right and what we can do to make it better, not worse. The hill has no issues where I live, but I have planted daylilies, and I have thrown out seeds for wildflowers up and down that hill. I have talked to Mike Bose, who is the landscape guy here, and talked to him about bringing in not trees, but bushes or plants of some kind that will be pretty on there, that will have flowers and that will hold in the bank. He doesn't want to do it until the spring, and that's fine with me. But we have to come up with the right thing, something with big root systems, and still look nice. So that's the way I feel about it. You may not all, but that's how it ended up the way it ended up.
Thank you. Ms. Harpendale, 181 is old, here. I'm just wrestling with a couple of questions that have occurred to me as I listen to the discussion here. The first, I'm not entirely sure. To me, it seems like the planning commission works with buildings and structures. So I would ask John, is this really a question for the planning commission, or is it part of the city code? Should it be addressed in the city code? Whether vegetation is an appropriate subject for the planning commission
or whether that's something that might be in the city code. Jimmy might be able to shed some light on that. And number two is also a legal question. What sort of liability do property owners either above the bluff or below the bluff incur with whatever they should do with the property there? If one of these property owners clear cuts their property and the entire bluff comes down on a house down below, is there not some liability there? Are we not a litigious society? Or what if somebody down below should undercut the bluff so that it causes a landslide and takes out the house up above? Where is this individual property responsibility as well as rights? How does that play into this situation? That's what.
Thanks, Mark. Let's hold those. Next questions, great questions. Maggie, did you have another thought?
No, I think that she covered it, and that was when I had them trimming the trees above me, you know, I worked with them and I said I wanted some of these trees down that were dying because trees will die, they will only last so long. You guys do this on Main Street and around the city to change them out, we know this. And so they were willing to take those out for me. And again, it's talking to your neighbor and walking through this, you know, and I really think that having involvement by the city is just overstepping our privacy. That's my comments.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You've already spoken, and Maggie, did you? Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet that would like to go first? Yes.
Wendy Reed, 539 East Bluff Drive.
Hey, Wendy, would you mind standing up? I'm having a hard time hearing.
Now, bluffs have existed for 2,000 years. The city of Howard Springs has existed for 150. When a Third Street resident, particularly on the north side of the street, purchased their property, they accepted the bluff and the houses upon the bluff as an existing condition. If any of these fellow citizens were to list their homes for sale tomorrow, they would have no trouble selling it for the asking price. The bluff and the trees behind it be damned. If any of us on the bluff were to list our homes for sale tomorrow, we would also have no trouble selling them and for the price listed. But we would take a financial hit if we had to list in the sale document that we do not have total ownership of our view. In the 32 years I have lived and owned property in Harbor Springs, I have had 2 neighbor-owned trees fall on my property, both causing damage. One house sustained $40,000 worth of damage to the roof. In both instances, I did not approach my neighbor as there was no point. Neither could afford to do anything to financially rectify the situation. I called my insurance agent and the contractor, and the problem was solved. If my neighbor and I had gotten into a disagreement about the damage, we both could have and would have called our respective attorneys, and a judge would have resolved that issue. The city should not want to involve itself in these individual scenarios, as the result would be the city getting named in each and every one of these minor legal tussles. I do not think that that is the proper use for any of our tax dollars. In short, the city of Harbor Springs would be eroding the private property rights of every taxpayer in the city to protect the few who will end up with issues over time. Giving up our rights to protect a few is not a fair trade-off. And the city needs to recognize that this would result in an easy to win lawsuit, and now an entire city of hostile residents and a recall election of our current city government would be guaranteed. It takes a lot to get us stirred up, but this would do it.
Thank you, Wendy.
Chair, I'm gonna remind people on Zoom, if they want to comment, they have to raise their hands. I will unmute you.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, listen to all this, we're all dependent on our aesthetics. But the reality of what's at issue is who gets to decide, property owners or the city? And I think that history will say, in almost all cases, owners of valuable property will make better decisions than a committee in the city.
Thank you. All right.
So, yeah,
Did somebody?
yeah. Peggy, Peggy, you can go.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. It's Mary Margaret Aboud. I have the pleasure of being at 527 East Bluff Drive and 497 East Main Street. So not quite Third Street, but definitely down below. I appreciate everybody's comments today. I especially appreciate the folks who have described a collaborative process that happens between neighbors rather than engaging with the city. Part of the attraction, certainly for my parents when they bought our house in the 1970s, and when I bought my own house in 2012, was buying in a community that was not restricted as an association, full of rules, and dictating whether or not I could drive my car to my house, or whether or not this tree could be where it was, or the unstated rules about who's appropriate to have at your house and all of that. It's very specifically, my parents chose Main Street to not have those strictures, and I myself have chose the Bluff for the same reason, is to not have someone, an association, dictating how I'm going to enjoy the blessing of being in Harbor Springs. In the very case in point myself, I'm delighted to have Bill and Eileen, who are in the room there as my neighbors, and we're working out a situation right now where there's a few trees in their yard that they would like trimmed, and I have a few trees that I would like trimmed. And so I've had a service come and we talked it through, and we're going to make an appointment that's convenient for everybody to take some trees down and figure out if we're going to plant anything else to make that work out. And we did all of this without having the city involved at all. And hopefully we're going to do it, God willing, without anybody calling the police. So I think that there's lots of ways to work this out that don't involve the good time and effort of this group. And if it's just, as someone has said, neighbors being neighbors, let's try to resolve this together rather than involving the lawyers, who I happen to be one. I don't think that we need them in this situation. I think that we all just need to be neighborly and think about how to be kind and compassionate to each other rather than involving laws and new policies and zoning procedures and all of that, because that just leads to all of us putting our lawyer hats on when we don't really want to do that. We're in Harbor Springs to enjoy it and not get litigious. So thanks so much for letting me comment.
Thank you. All right. Why don't we bring it back to the Planning Commission then? And let's see what people took away from those excellent comments. Anyone want to start the discussion?
Well, it's the framework for the discussions, whether we would consider bringing in an expert for some type of analysis of the bluff to create some kind of baseline. Is that sort of what we're
That is one option that we could recommend. Okay. And we could recommend that it makes sense to consider some type of regulation on trimming on the bluff, or we could recommend that it doesn't make sense and to not take action on this idea. Or any number of other intermediate things.
Well, I think the way I look at it is that, if we want to go down the road, what are the parameters of the decision? What are the criteria we have to look at? People have brought up some very good points on it. Or do we even want to start going down that road? Because that's going to cost money. You get different experts with different opinions. How do you determine which one to use? Do we even want to start down the road? My first and biggest question. Great.
Other thoughts?
I mean, my thought is also, if we don't bring in an expert, what's happened with 119 could happen up on the bluff, and the cost does come to the city, so that's something that we have to take into consideration. I don't think anybody on the planning is really going after the canopy or the aesthetics. It's more of the stability that we're kind of concerned, because in the end, that cost will come to us to kind of pay for it. So.
Bruce, what are you taking away from this?
Well, property rights is always brought up anytime you want to regulate anything. I lived on Hilton Head for 10 years, 11 years. They had restrictions on what size trees could be cut down and what had to replace it. And it kept the place very green, and it brought tourists in because they like the community, they like the looks of trees. We are a tree city, and yet we allow trees to get butchered all the time.
I think we need to do something to make sure no more clear cutting is done like it was done on Bluff on the corner up there. It's a hideous looking thing. It may bring a view, but a view is worthless without something in the foreground to look through and to see. It's aesthetics, but that's the way I feel. When I watch those trees come down, I couldn't believe it. And now when you look at it from down below, it's hideous with all those stumps sticking up 3, 4, 5 feet tall. Just, it looks like a disaster zone. It should not be allowed to happen again. And when I bought my house, I had a view of the bay, the harbor. And the real estate agent made it very clear to me that I was buying the house. I was not buying the view. There was no control that I would have over that view. So I think we need some sort of regulation to protect the bluff and to protect our master plan, which says we want to keep it a natural, beautiful place because that's what brings tourists in. It's a pretty place. And if they see all these denuded hills, they can go to California and watch a burned out forest. Why come here? So I think we need to look into it, and I think we need to come up with some sort of plan to protect the look and the feel of harbor and to keep the look stabilized.
Good, thank you. Bob? Reaction?
Rick pretty well said everything. I'm the last person in this room to advocate more government control. You all know that. It doesn't appear that, at least to me, that the folks who have been entrusted to take care of this themselves have been willing to do the right thing or the good thing or whatever. My opinion is different than their opinions, and always will be. Clear cutting trees is ridiculous. However, I'm not about to upset the balance of nature at this point. It doesn't affect me, and if that's the way you want to be, and this gentleman in the back is certainly more qualified to make an intelligent decision than I am. So I said, you are certainly more qualified to make an intelligent decision than I am. So I'll stay out of this and let you have your way.
Good for you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate being insulted. We all do.
Okay. Let's keep this collaborative.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Emily?
Take a moment. I just want to thank everybody for like all their comments and concerns, because we're all here for a reason that we love Harbor Springs. I'm always about facts and knowledge when I make a decision, even though I like to make things from the heart as well. I think it would be nice to know what the facts are about stabilizing the bluff. I know the tree arborist had thoughts on it. I don't know if it's the thoughts that are like with the, like other, I'm just kind of, yeah, anyways, I just think communication is important and just be good neighbors and thoughtful with each other. And I think that's will make everybody like it's a good thing. Yeah, sorry.
Martin, do you have any other thoughts before I weigh in?
Yes, I do. I sort of disagree with y'all down there, just because right now I don't think there's much of the bluff being destabilized, and it's been around for a long time. And it's been cut before, be cut again, and give that cutting up there 5 years and you won't know what's there anymore. So I sort of sense that from my position, I don't really see that there's an issue there that can't be resolved within the neighborhood. If it continues to happen and it starts to have actual damage, things do start to move and slide, then I think it would be appropriate to have an analysis of it. But if we go down the road of bringing in soils engineers and all this kind of stuff, they will. They may or may not find a problem. We find out what really holds the soil together, but then that's the fact stuff that, Emily mentioned, that's very important to have, but then we have to look at the legal problem every time we're going to want to enforce something. How is it enforced? Who's going to make those decisions? We're just going to add in another whole nother layer that I don't know if it's really necessary at this point, because whether you like what something looks like or not, I think is the point here. I think the point is damage actually being done? Are other people's property being threatened? And there's been cases of issues happening over history, going back to when Harbor was first probably built, there's something happened that somebody wasn't happy with. That's part and parcel of life. So I understand your positions on that, but I'm coming down on the other side of the fence on this one.
There were some very thought-provoking comments. I really appreciate them. I'm coming down on the side of something short of regulation here, and I think that folks who mentioned that collaboration between neighbors is the best way to approach this thing. Although I am really interested in some facts and some knowledge. We have conflicting information from dueling arborists. People over the years have called for a hydrologist. I don't even know all the names of all the disciplines that could get involved in these things, but I think one approach could be to let's get a couple experts and let's maybe get a paper that is best practices, not a regulation, but best practices about, our bluff, our soils and our vegetation, our native plants, and neighbors could use that best practices document together to decide what the right approach is. And then let's give that 4 or 5 years or a decade or something like that. And let's see if we can work together and do something collaborative, but do it on a fact-based approach. So I would not be in favor of recommending regulation for trimming on the bluff on private property. So any other thoughts? We could do a motion, or someone could make a motion, or it could just be tabled and we don't take action on it tonight. I'm open to any approach.
Well, we could, cut the baby in half here. Could we make a motion that we maybe explore what it would take to put together an analysis? Just who do you speak to? What are some cost ranges? Just so we have that information before we decide if we want to go down that path. Is that
Yeah,
possibility?
That's great. I mean, I don't even think we would need a motion for that. We could just ask staff if they would explore that and see what we need to do to get some facts here. And get some agreement from the right kind of experts. If we do that, we could always come back to what comes next too.
Well, why don't we do that? People could go home, probably comments tonight.
Jeff, do you need anything?
I want to comment that through the tree board, one of their goals is also to, outreach and education. So, regulation isn't always, sometimes education outreach is a top priority. So they are working, through their monthly meetings and looking at, the tree canopy article that they put in the Harbor Light monthly, a way to educate people. And so I think using the tree board as a resource and a tool to also, I like your idea, Bill, of better practices as, not a regulation, but a best practices, as more of an education outreach on, that it goes over better with communities than regulations do. And also another one that's sometime potentially looked down the line is also incentive, maybe not regulation, but incentive. What incentive does this community want, if we care about the tree canopy that much, if we care about, or we're concerned about the bluff stability, but we're not willing to regulate, is there incentive that we can provide for people to not do that? But those are the two other options other than regulation, which usually go over better in the communities. But yes, we can, Jeff and I we can talk with John and look at, what it would take to do an analysis of that kind and bring that back to you, see if that's something, we should pursue.
How does that sound to get a proposal for what kind of experts would be involved, and then we can decide to engage some or not engage some, and then after that, we get a report, we can decide is something else warranted other than just a collaborative kind of a thing. Rick and Bob especially, are you okay with that?
I'm good.
I'm good. All right. So,
Yeah, that would be a recommendation.
Yeah, realistically, what that would be, if we gathered that data, I think the ultimate decision of the planning commission would be that we would make a recommendation to city council to explore further looking into hiring that work to be done.
great. What, do you see that coming at this point, or do you see gathering the?
No, I think we could
The
certainly
resources
reach out and find
Yeah.
what it would entail. What experts we would contact and what their costs might be.
Okay.
And
that
bring that
can come back
information
to us.
back, what they might find, or, what types of advice they might give us. And then we could further discussion, and then the ultimate thing I think would be, because
And once you find out that there's already best practices for this exact issue.
Yeah.
This has happened in other places, and we may be able to find that rather quickly, and then we decide whether we want to adapt parts of it or not.
But it's.
That comes to the surface pretty quickly.
That's true, but to a certain extent, we have to remember that our, I guess, topography and geology here is different. So there are you can go on the internet and find national best practices, but a hillside in California is much different. A bluff in California is much
Yes.
different than a bluff.
Agreed.
Brings different soils, different vegetation, different issues. So my thinking, of course, the Little Traverse Conservancy is one, but we would have to look at the different types of experts, and we can bring that back to the planning commission and then
Great.
make a recommendation to council whether or not we want to spend any money on it.
Okay. John Leo, did you have a thought?
Just a comment, this is not the first time that bluff trimming has come before the city. And I think Ben Vealing is a good resource and probably has the history, because we've talked about bluff soil analysis in the past. We've gone down that rabbit hole. And he might have a record of the research that he did. And if anybody knows our topography and our plant structure, it's him. So before you go on a broader search, I would really touch it.
We'll do that. I'm interested in little geology though, too. Maybe that could supplement the plant-based knowledge. But let's see what we can dig up. So, all right, commissioners, do we have a plan that you're satisfied with?
I was just going to offer my plant management plan by Richard Hitz, arborist for the committee to look over. It's very educational, Bob and Rick, and I think you'll find it interesting reading. Because it talks about which trees we should keep, which trees we shouldn't, and for preserving them for all of us.
Right.
And I have it in my car, I'm happy to drop it off, and it costs me quite a bit to have this done. So I would like to use it for the betterment of the city.
That's great. Thanks for the offer.
Something you could copy for us?
We'll accept it.
Okay.
Okay, we're about to wrap up, but yes, sir, would you like to have one more final say?
Yeah, my name is Eric Rasmussen. I live on South Lake Shore Drive, let's say, and nearly a decade I spent with the 119 Harbor Commission, Heritage Highway. This topic is an enormous topic of steep slopes and regulation on building and things of that nature. And I just thought I'd point out the fact that you have 4 townships in your neighborhood. It's gone down this road before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information gathered on that.
Excellent. So C townships, check. See Ms. Demmer's research, check.
This is Denver. If you would give a copy of that to me, I can make copies for the planning commission members.
As long as we're collecting resources.
At some point in time, it doesn't have to be right now. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Michael Van Lockring, 685 East Bluff. I've been in the county for 30 years. I've worked with about 6 or 7 arborists or tree trimmers or whatever. And every one of them has a different idea of what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
So before you dig into this thing, and spending a lot of money, I would make sure that you don't get caught with nowhere to go.
That's my concern too. Yep, thanks. We've had a lot of opinions over the years. All right, let's try it again though. Let's see what we can turn up. Let's see if we can get a consensus on recommendations and best practices, and then we'll decide where to go from there. All right, thank you very much. We'll close out this topic, and you are welcome to stay or to go. No hard feelings either way. Thank you very much. No, you're gonna go.
Well done.
How are you?
I wonder if they've done
We need you back.
It just.
We'll take it 2 minutes to bring it out.
So. So.
I know.
You ran everybody off.
It just took me an hour to walk. Very well.
You still word on him?
Not so much. I'm fishing more than anything.
Well, fishing.
What's that?
We're all fishing. One way or the other.
Good point.
You're on this side, you're not. They are all those. You mean 587? Yes, they are on the. We do have to go into the session here. To address that. But then after that, we have clarity for condos, 693 East Lake, and then 587. You're number 4.
All right.
Oh, I didn't mind.
Do we know where Bill went?
2 meetings now, right? You're like good cheers.
Keep an eye on that. I know. Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's reconvene. All right, we're back in session, and the next thing on the agenda is the public hearing on the short-term rental ordinance number 438. Victor, you want to set us up on this one?
Right, Jim.
Jim.
All right, before we get into the public discussion, I would propose that we hold a very short meeting in closed session with the planning commission so that we can discuss a little bit of background on this proposed ordinance. And I think that'll be useful to the planning commission when you consider it. And if you would be so inclined, I would ask that someone make a motion to meet in closed session under section 8E of the Open Meetings Act, specifically to consult with the city attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with a lawsuit filed by Robin Johnson, because an open meeting could have a detrimental financial effect on the litigating or settlement position of the city.
So moved. All right, we have a motion made and a second. All right, folks in the room, sorry, we don't
This does call for a roll call.
usually do this. Calls for a roll call. Let's have a roll call vote on that motion, please.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Mark Bede, Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Here, yes.
Emily DeBay,
Yes.
Rick Turchinski. Motion passed. And we'll try and be as quick as we can.
I'm gonna tell the secrets of staging.
We're leaving.
Hey, guys, why don't we just kind of like come over here and gather around.
Well, I see you're talking about this. I thought we were reading about it.
Yeah, what's that? You can hear the recording.
Well, maybe he's not.
Yes.
All right.
Over your ears, this is secret stuff.
Yeah, we're doing it right now, right?
Let me hold on.
Or we could mute ourselves.
How do you
Can we move our legs a little?
Open up a window too.
Good.
Brought bananas, snacks.
I've got a squirrel issue at home.
We got 2 more closed sessions.
They figured out how to get into my.
That's why Kathy, you gotta get your.
Okay, let's get going here. All right, we are back in open session and Jim Raymer, would you like to set the stage for us? What we need to consider.
Okay, we have an ordinance before you to consider. This would expand the number of short-term rental licenses from 61 to 63 in the R1 and AR district. And the intent would be to grant these 2 licenses to 2 people who contended they timely filed and who appealed to the city council for relief, but the council did not at that time feel it was appropriate. But the council may reconsider that on the basis of this ordinance. So the issue is before you. Are you agreeable to recommending this to the city council?
And again, it's not planning commission who can enact this. It's just a recommendation to city council who will hear all the details all over again. Any discussion or thoughts on this one?
We do have a comment from Tony Johnson, planning commission member.
Right.
Tony, I have asked you to unmute. You can go ahead.
You don't.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for letting me participate remotely. Sorry, I can't be there in person. I certainly not opposed to adding these 2 additional licenses. I just want to make sure the reasoning behind these 2 cannot be kind of found on any other potential interested parties who may be wanting to have a license as well. So whatever the reason was here, I don't know that history. I'm sorry. If there's any other people out there who feel they may be in that same boat, I just want to make sure that has been appropriately considered.
I think the situation here, it is unique. Both these two property owners effectively appealed to the city council. They've represented on, at least one of them is represented under oath. They submitted the application timely. And the city is adopting new protocols that it's going to make an effort to contact people who have an existing license and who have not applied before the deadline, to reach out to them and ask them whether they intend to apply or not. So I think both new protocols and an attempt to be equitable here results in this approach that I think protects the city in the long run.
Right. Should we open up the public hearing, because this is the public hearing?
I make a motion to open the public hearing.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Do we need a roll call on that, Jeff, or just a voice vote? All in favor of opening the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, public hearing is open. Does anyone in the public have a comment on this proposed ordinance? Wendy?
When I overheard the city council, when they passed this for 61, my first thought was, this is gonna cause a lawsuit because you open the mail and you open 61 and you had 65 in there. How do you regulate who gets it in there first? So extending it to 63 doesn't solve the problem. That's just my comment. I don't have a dog in this fight. And by the way, I have a short-term rental right next door to me. Peggy Abood runs an outstanding short-term rental.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other comments from the public? All right, anyone care to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Public hearing is closed. Planning commissioners, any discussion, questions, thoughts you'd like to offer? All right, I'll make a motion that planning commission recommend adoption of this updated ordinance to city council.
Second.
There's a motion in a second. Why don't we do a roll call vote?
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Bob Philip,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Boudet,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. All right. Topic is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, planning commission.
Very much. Appreciate seeing that. All right, on to the more concrete things. The next thing on the agenda is split for Claridge Court condominiums. John, would you like to, or who do you think, John or Jeff?
I can take it.
All right, good.
I did email out, when we originally sent the packet out, we did not have a copy of the third-party engineer report at the time. We did send that out as a second email. Does anybody want a hard copy?
Yes, I would.
Yeah, for the other one.
I got this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have this one.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I think at the last meeting, there was, the project was discussed relative to the site condominium for 6 lots as part of the Claridge condos. We had 2 opposing reviews. Benchmark noted that they felt the construction was doable. Our firm, after review, said we didn't think lots 6 and 5 were feasible, particularly lot 6, lot 5. We were recommending to push the road a little bit to the north in order to increase the buildable area for lot 5. Planning Commission decided to get a third opinion. So what we did is we retained the Spicer Group, Nils Lindwall, who's a professional engineer, senior project manager. His specialty is geotechnical engineering, soils and structures. So in the review,
We could have some more business.
yeah, so in the review, Nils thinks that the construction appears feasible, but he did have 3 concerns. First concern was that the foundations located on sloping ground tend to have less bearing capacity. And there would be more information regarding the depth of the foundations and actually what the specifications would be for the foundations. And then he had mentioned about the disturbance on superficial soils and vegetation on steep slopes can lead to excessive erosion. He noted that more information was needed regarding what measures would be taken to restore, protect, and revegetate the slope. And then there was also the concern about stormwater runoff and how the stormwater will be safely conveyed to the bottom of the slope. So he's saying it's feasible, but there's additional information that needs to be reviewed. And I would believe that that would probably be reviewed prior to Jeff issuing a zoning permit. Really wouldn't need further, I don't think it would need further review by this commission. But that information should be presented as part of the review for the zoning permit. And then maybe Spicer then would be re-engaged to take a look at that data to make sure that it's appropriate. So that's how the third party review came out.
And what I took away from that was looks feasible to build there with some caution.
With caution.
All right.
Your planning commission discussion, Nancy does have.
Oh, great. Yes.
Nancy, letting you speak now.
Hi, thanks for being patient with me not being there. Victor, can you roll that? This is the letter about the one on 3rd Street. Can you roll to the first page of the one for Claridge for me on your screen share?
Okay, yeah, let me stop sharing, reshare that.
I thought
Sometimes-
I saw when I read it that it talked about 4 additional homes instead of 5. I just don't have all that with me.
Oh, this is.
This is still the other one.
It's the letter, but there's two letters. We have one.
There are 2
for-
letters back to back in the packet, and the second one is.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay, okay, yeah, a new roadway. Where did I read 4 additional homes instead of 5?
It's after project overview. It's in that section. Second line down.
4 new residential structures, and actually we were asking them to look at 5 more lots because there are 6 lots and one already has a home on it. So I was just confused on if they looked at 5 and 6, or I wasn't sure what that meant.
Yes, they looked at 5 and 6 in particular.
Okay, but this is saying they can see where 4 new homes can be built, but Claridge's are asking for 5 new homes. Is that correct?
No, there's already 2 homes there.
There's one,
I
but there's
think-
6 lots.
He may not have noticed the lot that's behind the existing home as being a separate lot. And if you look on that drawing there, you can see that because primarily we've been discussing the slope issues. And on the drawing that's up right now, there's Denise has put on the 4 new homes that would be located along the slope.
Okay, all right,
Not
I just
put it
want,
right.
that's fine. I just need clarification on that. I took away the same message that you did, that we just need some more information before providing a permit.
Yeah, at the last meeting, it was brought up a problem with the water lines. Has that been resolved?
I did have a conversation with Lucas about that. I know that was a concern that John and Vanessa had.
Yeah.
To recap, there was a concern that the line, I think it was the size of the line being an 8-inch line, that was excessive. And that it dead ended as opposed to looping.
Correct.
I had a conversation with Lucas Vanderzee with the DPW. He was aware of that project. He didn't have any concerns with the way that they had proposed to do the utilities. He said we have, it's not unusual that we have other locations in town with a similar situation where they dead end. He said looping is probably in the long run the more optimal choice, but that it's not unusual. It meets all the requirements of the state of Michigan. And they do have other situations in town where this happens, and they monitor them to make sure that there aren't any water issues. And if there are, then they could go in and flush that system through a hydrant. And I believe they do propose that they're going to have a hydrant at the end of this. So
Does that monitoring and flushing cause any extra expense for the city?
I don't believe so, and I don't think we've really had any issues with that at this point. He certainly didn't seem to insinuate that, from my conversation with him, that there was a problem with that. It's just something that they apparently do. So, yeah. And he rattled off, I think, like 6 or 8 other locations where we have this, like Easy Street, I think, is another one where it just goes in and dead ends. And a couple other examples like that where we've done projects like this.
Thank you.
So if the water is satisfactory design, then we're down to these 3 questions on the slope on these 2 lots.
Well, I do have some other questions. So in the reading through their documents, there's. I guess it's a general question, what takes precedent? Do their documents take precedent over city zoning? Because some of the stuff in here is sort of like they give themselves the association the right to do setbacks and things like that.
Page 6.
Right. So who's controls? City. The city controls. And there's other things in there. I went through and a fair amount of yellow in here about just those specific issues that don't quite seem right and conflict with the city ordinance. Is that something we should be concerned about at this point?
I don't think we've had Jim review them before. We've reviewed them here at the planning commission. The other example that I can think of in the time that I've been here, really the only other one is the condominium association over between Second and Third Street.
Yeah.
When we reviewed that, I think there's a combination of things here. You know, if it's conflicting, we might want to address it, but I know that.
There's several that do.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 6. Yeah, and another one on page 10, they're talking about construction of, at this association's sole discretion, they permit the contractor to construct a temporary shelter. You know, like they can actually build something versus just having a job trailer. That's not in our code, I don't think, but just from a neighbor point of view, it's like, why would a contractor build a temporary structure for construction purposes? There's not a limitation on size. It could be a lot of things that might be undesirable. So that's something that,
well, they still,
I haven't seen it done ever. So I don't know why it's in their docs.
they still would have to meet city zoning. So, you know, even if they have language in their master deed stating that they have the rights to do things, they still have to meet the requirements that we have for city zoning as well.
Okay, and I can get dragged into a lawsuit or anything like that.
I don't think, that might be that they're saying that the association is okay with it. Like, example, we don't regulate what color siding people put on their homes. But an association could go so far as to say, we only want to see green or blue siding. And that's a example of where an association can be on. Color siding or
Color of siding.
yeah, so that's an example where we might not regulate at all. They've taken it a step further to say they can, they can or can't.
Do we
do
want to
this.
let them build some structure out there temporarily for construction purposes? Which could be, there's no limitations on it here. And do we cover that in our zoning ordinance?
Our zoning doesn't provide any special treatment for temporary structures. If they're putting a structure on their property, it would have to meet zoning. So if they wanted to do a temporary structure during construction, then they would need to get a zoning permit for that to go up. And it would have to meet the requirements of the zoning.
And then the only other area is under their general requirements where a lot of their stuff that they pulled out is just boilerplate, standard type stuff, which is okay. But under protection of the environment, they've said in a couple of places, protection of the environment is of the essence. And it's the responsibility of the contractor to perform all work in a manner that preserves the environment integrity. Just one big in adjacent areas is just one big general statement. Are we okay with that? General statement leaving it up to the contractor? As far as erosion and all that stuff.
Well, he's gonna have
It's a big general. Yeah, I know you gotta get building permit, erosion permit and all that stuff. But these are pretty steep slopes. And so this would be, we want to add anything in there, I guess now is the time. Unless everybody's okay with all of this stuff. I don't want to extend this meeting any
You can
longer.
certainly have a discussion with the applicant to see if they really want that wording or if they're flexible on changing some of that wording. Another idea, because it sounds like the concern is the grading and the vegetation that would be on that grade. So maybe a possible suggestion could be that we ask them to put in their master deed that when applying for building permits and zoning, that a vegetation plan and a grading plan must be included. And stormwater runoff, that's something that we typically, whenever we have a project or a portion of a project that's very close to a property line or in a situation where there's the floodplain, we make sure to ask for some type of a stormwater plan to be part of that.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is that in their documents, they're just conflicts. Like they say they can burn debris. They can burn vegetative debris. Is that something that we allow?
No,
So it's just like, these things shouldn't be in here if we don't allow them. Because it's just gonna now, they start doing something, police have to go up there, they tell them they can't do it. But just these conflicts, I think are rather bothersome
Well, I
to
think
me.
at that case, as John recommended, or not recommended, but mentioned, we might want to have our attorney
Yeah.
go through this.
It'd be nice if they're just cleaned up, because they're just, they still have the use of explosives in here. I think Bob brought up 2-3 months ago. That is still in here, which is admittedly absurd, but it's in there. So. Ryan.
What's the matter with the few explosions?
I just, but I'm just, it's, they have a right to do this, and I'm glad that we got the third party review and everything. It just that there's a series of things in here that I think can be buttoned up a little bit better that would help protect the city and the neighbors. That's my only point.
I think we have 3 ways that we could address that tonight. You could, if you feel that it doesn't impact the decision, we could approve it anyway with the language in there. If you feel that that language needs to be changed and brought back to the planning commission for discussion here, we could again table this to be brought back for a future meeting. Or if you are of the mind, you could say that the applicant and city staff could meet together. We can include Jim Raymer in that discussion, and that the 2 parties could address those issues to make sure that they're compliant with the code. If we're able to address that, then they could record that master deed and we could proceed. If we're not able to come to an agreement on what that could be, then it could come back here.
I like that idea.
Yeah, because the one thing I saw reading through that was that there was no declaration that city, county, state, or federal requirements take precedent.
Yeah, there's nothing. in
There's
there about
nothing in
that.
there about
Yeah, so I'm comfortable with that, that there's, we can get this, the bar's rather low right now. Let's get the bar up here where it belongs. Because I think it protects everybody.
I'm happy to do that. Meet with you, yeah.
Okay.
That would, I think, enable us to proceed if you're of that mind.
It's with the rest of the board.
I agree. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep the roll on it.
Can I don't know if I'm still on.
Yeah, we can hear you, Nancy.
Can you hear me? One other thing I caught was, I think Rick addressed who is responsible for keeping the flood area clear of debris. And Rick had said he thought it should be the association. I believe in the documents, it still says the property, the individual property owners. So I'm not sure which way we want to recommend that.
I'm also happy to make that concession and
Okay.
make it the responsibility of the association.
Yeah, yeah, and just another section too, just so when you have this meeting on page. Under special provisions 3, under topsoil seeds and mulch, I think it doesn't speak to steep slope conditions. And I suggest that it should be addressed directly, it's just, general stuff. But it's only steep slopes we're really concerned about, so I think that'd be nice if it were in here.
I think we can work that together, right? She can certainly, we can certainly meet together. John, you'd be available for a discussion like this? Yeah.
And then the other part was that of this is that it has to come back to the Spicer group, right?
Yeah.
So there's every plan, when you build the structure, it's got to go to the Spicer group to be approved, who's reviewing what? I guess I'm not real clear on that.
I think we recommended going to Spicer Group to address these
Yes.
outstanding concerns at first.
Oh, so it's gonna be done on the front end.
Yes.
And once that's addressed.
Then they get a permit.
And then it gets confirmed it's done. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so we have a possible course of action, which would be to convene the applicant with the right city resources to scrub the condo document sometime in the future. And then if the applicant's willing to come back and address the 3 issues raised by the Spicer group, but we'll let Beckett and Rader be the.
Yeah, they don't have to come back here. They would just.
What you could do is you could have a motion to approve the condominium master deed lot split with the condition that the applicant work with city staff to refine some of the language in their document before it's
mutually agreeable conclusion.
correct. If we're not able to do that, then we would come back. If we're able to do that, then the city staff would just say, okay, you're good to take this and have it recorded at the Register of Deeds office. At that time, when they record that master deed and documentation, the split would then take effect.
And the second part of that motion to have Spicer Group review the front. These three criteria on the front end. Yeah.
Is that before each application or just when we finalize the document?
Before each application.
Oh, before each application?
Well, yeah, because they can't review it until there's actually a building plan that shows the foundation.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, they have to be looking at that. So when the builder comes in
Sure.
for the zoning permit, then that's when they would look at it.
Yep, good. Let's go over to the applicant.
I'm Brian with Benchmark Engineering. So how does that work with Spicer? If the applicant comes to us for a grading plan for one of the lots, we give it to the city gives it to Spicer for a review, or how is that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how it was.
So they're like a second review or second party or whatever.
And it's not only the grading plan, his conditions too, were he wanted to see what the engineering on the foundation was.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
that would be-
the whole
that would
thing.
be Mark's deal,
Yeah.
that he's designing a house to come up with the engineering on that.
Yeah,
for the foundation.
And I would-
That's what,
I'll also clarify that,
Yeah, Ryan.
that maybe we don't specify the specific group, because I don't know if the Spicer Group necessarily will always be available, but that the city takes it to a third party.
Sure. I don't care.
Yeah, just because we don't know when these are gonna come.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Any quick comments on that before we ask for some public input on this?
Just to be clear, on this point number one about the foundation, so they would have to submit things to get that approved from Spicer before they could build. Because I still don't think 5 and 6 are really buildable. I mean, there's this much on solid land and then it's hanging off a cliff.
To answer your question, and in Nils' review was until a building plan is actually developed that shows what the foundations are gonna be, they really can't do that evaluation to determine if the foundation is engineered appropriately for that degree of slope. So it's gonna be on a case-by-case basis.
I think really what this is turning into or looking like is very similar to the process that we have for people that wish to build below the bluff within proximity of the restricted bluff zone, which we're actually going to be looking at later on tonight, a situation where that's coming up. So a similar plan of action with those is they can build within that area. They just have to provide engineering documentation showing that they're doing it, meeting the standards that we need them to meet. So we can basically have a similar process for lots 5 and 6, in this project.
Okay.
Does that seem like a?
Yep.
Yeah, well said.
Yep. Thanks, Rich. Care to get some public input if there is any on this at this point? Okay. We need a motion on that? No, okay. Would anyone care to offer any advice and ideas on this one? News Irish.
I'm Pam Irish, 669 Brook Drive. I think it's a shame that somebody's going to be able to build on the edge of the ravine. It's been a natural place, preventive situation we spent that much money on to protect it as a watershed. And now you're going to turn around and allow the houses being built right on the edge of that. So we could look to California for lessons in what happens when there's erosion. I think it's fall into the ocean. Need to see a house fall into the ravine.
Thank you very much. Any other input? Any is coming?
I agree with him. When they repaved Pine Street, I was hoping that the city would see a way to turn that ravine into a natural walking path. They still could do it with the time it was here, but not if they're gonna be hanging out over it.
Yeah, all right. I take your point. Thank you. Mark?
I'll ask another quick question.
Yeah.
Are there lines on there that show the FEMA floodplain zone?
Yes.
Yeah, they're not.
Was that on one of the other things, there was sort of a crosshatch section in the bottom? That was the FEMA.
It's not necessarily highlighted overly on this slide, but there are other pages to this document that do more clearly show precisely where the floodplain is.
And these proposed building sites are not in that FEMA.
Correct.
Floodplain.
I have a question for you.
Wait, let's see if there's any more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Let's talk
Any more
about this.
ideas, comments? Okay, thanks. Back to the commission then.
Okay, just since they mentioned the FEMA water plane, floodplain. In the state of Michigan, you can build in a floodplain. You just have to meet certain requirements, which aren't really that strict, really. Do you have any intention of any of these buildings being in the floodplain? No, they will not be in the floodplain.
No.
Okay.
That was one thing we made sure of when setting the setbacks. And that was part of getting rid of the cul-de-sac and moving to the T, is it moved those buildable
That was
areas.
2 months ago. I can't remember that.
Well, there was a cul-de-sac, our zoning, yeah, and so by moving the property lines up, we helped pull those buildable envelopes away from the floodplain. They originally weren't in there, but that was one of our concerns, and we were able to move that north so that they would be flooded from the floodplain.
From behind, that's my motto.
I have a philosophical question for Jeff. Is it the city's duty to protect someone who's gonna build on one of these lots? You know, Ann mentioned a house could fall in the ravine. Is it the city's duty to protect someone from building a bad building or?
I'm gonna answer your question by answering the question I want to answer. And that's, I think our responsibility at the planning commission is twofold. One is, do these lots meet zoning? Right? Or do they meet the minimum width? Do they meet the area? Things like that. And I think our second responsibility is, are we creating a lot that someone can build on without needing a variance? We don't want to create a lot that the only way to build on it is you have to have a variance. So, you know, that's, I think, the question that I would want to answer is, if 5 years from now, someone buys lot 5, right, are they going to come to the city and say, I can't build on this without a variance, I need to move my house to this location, give me a variance so that I can build? And so if we see that there's no way that someone could build on lot 5 without a variance, we should not approve. But, and I think that's why the engineering reports are important, to specify and say, yes, they can, no, they can't. And I think we've got that information to, you know, originally we had some conflicting views. Now we have a third opinion that says it could work, but we need to see what it would do and how it would work.
I'll answer your question, Bill.
Good.
So cities have not just the ability, but many consider it the obligation to protect the public safety and the welfare and the health of the public. So that's why we enacted regulations that go. So all the regulations that we should be enacting or should be under that guise of, does it protect, promote public health, safety, and the welfare? And now those have broad, especially public welfare has a broad reach, a broad overreach. Some people use it to mean aesthetics, which, you know, there's philosophical differences there, but when we're talking about if it could threaten safety or someone's health, it's for all people in the city. So that's why we have regulations to protect that. So it's a different question though, to Jeff's point, is we have regulations that this applicant has come to under those regulations, and we must approve or deny it based on those regulations, not what regulation we may want to enact in the future to address the potential issue. So I don't know, John, if you want to add anything to that, but that's my view of the zone.
I kind of agree with Victor's summary on that. I mean, a good local example is, you know, the county had to put in place the bluff zone along M119. Primarily because some property owners decided to build into the bluff, and then they started experiencing problems. So the county had to step in, and they have a pretty comprehensive bluff ordinance. So Mark's probably familiar with it.
And that's really to protect the property owner from themselves.
Okay. All right. So, just. What I was trying to go all the way back mentally, and here's where I'm coming at. So the applicant is the property owner. The property, they're not asking to build outside of their property. They are following all the setbacks and all the zoning. You have actually adjusted their plan in order to comply with our recommendation, make it more buildable. If the city would prefer something else, we don't get that say necessarily. The property owner gets to decide what they want to do with their property. Jeff has confirmed that the lots are meet zoning, the lots are buildable with the right information. I'm not sure what else we can ask of the property owner. Any other thoughts? Should we proceed with asking city staff and the applicant to clean up the condo docks? And move to approve this if we can get to a mutually agreeable resolution. And then for each structure that's going to be built, the applicant would come back and provide the necessary documentation about the foundations, disturbance of the soils and the stormwater runoff.
We would consult with our third party or second party engineer. Bob had a question.
Yeah, Bob.
Will there be vegetation on the bluff to screen what's going to happen there from the
Yes,
road?
We plan on putting privacy screening, you mean from the road,
Okay,
and, yeah, to protect the neighbors and the residents. So yes, that we will have a landscape plan at some point.
okay. Thank you.
I just have one more question. This is Nancy. Who is responsible to pay when we bring it back to that third party to get their input on these three things? The property owner or the association, the city? Who pays for that?
What we have done in the past with the bluff is the property owner is responsible for providing their plan on how the work can be done and be done safely by their engineer. We have then had our engineer review that information and make sure that they concur.
On our cost.
And that would be at our cost. But that is part of the incorporated into the fee that we have for a review at the planning commission.
And will that fee cover having each property owner come back and have to have these three things reviewed? That's something we need to think about.
I think the way we have our escrow policy set up right now, it would always cover it, because if the costs that the planning commission is incurring with the review of a project exceed the escrow payment that's been made, we would ask the applicant to provide further payment to cover the costs.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just-
we no longer have one flat
Right.
fee. We changed the escrow approach, so as long as we continue with that approach, it should be covered by the applicant. But traditionally, we have covered it before we moved to escrow policy. The city has covered those costs, those reviews.
Okay, thanks.
And if the applicant were to sell lot 5 to a buyer a year from now, the buyer would come to the city for a zoning permit and all other requirements and would pay that escrow and would cover everything.
Whatever's needed at that time.
Sounds like, okay.
So all this would be rolled into the condo docs, everything we're talking about.
I think that would be a good place to store that information. That way everybody,
Very clear.
it's very clear and future people involved would be aware of it. The applicant would be aware of it when they're purchasing the property and they see the condo docs. Even if we have different people involved at the city staff level, that information is there in the condominium docs, so that it can be easily referenced.
Yep.
All right. Should I try to phrase a motion?
Please.
All right. I'd like to make a motion on this topic that we charge city staff to meet with the applicant and scrub the condo docs to include the changes that we've mentioned tonight. And if they can come to a mutually agreeable conclusion that let this proceed. And then also in the condo docs would be the procedure for each subsequent buyer of a lot to come to the city and get the proper approvals with their building plan for the foundation and the soils and the stormwater runoff.
Bill, can I just offer an amendment to that? It's just to say that, to start out with, you approve, that the plan commission approves of this project based on those conditions.
Yes, I agree. The planning commission would approve this project tonight based on those conditions. If the conditions can't be met, then they'll bring it back to us.
Yes.
Anyone care to second
I'll
that?
second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. And we'll do a roll call vote.
Can you repeat the motion?
Yeah, I bet I can closely. Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski.
No,
Okay, that's 5. If the,
Oh, wait, no, this is a
regular, this is last one, that motion passes. Any concern there?
Little adrenaline rush.
All right,
All right, that closes out the lot split issue. Good night, Brian. Okay. We're on to the next, which is a special land use request for 693 East Lake Street, 2 dwelling units on the same lot.
Believe I need this. Hi.
yes.
Thank you for waiting. We're sorry to keep you waiting, and we're very sorry we couldn't act on this last time for you.
No, I appreciate it. I understand that you gotta come our way to get it, so thank you.
Well,
That's what I was trying to
Sure,
cover.
here, so I had to come back. Jeff, do you want to set this up for us?
Sure. So to provide a little bit of background, we looked at this issue a couple of years ago. This is a house with a secondary building in the back of the property. It's right on the corner of Lake and Hoyt. And the background here, in I think it was 2018-ish, a new property owner purchased the property. We became aware of a zoning violation when the property was listed for sale. That property owner that purchased it in 2018 came to the planning commission for discussion on the zoning violation. The specific issue was, and we have the site plan up. Specific issue is the garage that was back here, which was built quite a long time ago. At some point in time, it was converted without the city's permission into a dwelling unit, and had been rented out. I approached the property owner in 2018, brought this to light that we had this zoning violation. They came into the planning commission, and through discussion at the planning commission at that time, the way that we chose to address that situation was to add a new use to the residential office and service zoning district to allow it through special land use for 2 dwellings on 1 property. It's really the only place that we allow that, where that both dwellings could then be rented. Anywhere else in the city, the situation would be a guest quarters scenario, which doesn't permit guest quarters to be rented. We did that. My understanding was that the owner at that time would have come to us with the special land use request to then do this use. He did never do that. So Mrs. McCullough, the new property owner, has some plans to make some modifications to the home. She can't do that until the special land use has been addressed. Right now, it's a existing nonconformity. She can't expand and change that property until she addresses the use issue. And I think she's got a plan to maybe adjust the deck and maybe add a garage on the property at some point in the future. So we have to look at the non-conforming use, which through special land use approval would be conforming. That provides some background
Yes,
on
great
that.
background, thank
All right.
you. Very tight. Okay, should we hear from the applicant?
That covers a lot of it. So we did purchase the location in July. Couple faults, not to any of yours, but to our end, it wasn't disclosed that there was an issue when we bought the house. They said that there was an issue because there was a short-term rental usage and they had issues with that. We're not intending to do that. I know the rules that are here. They did disclose long-term, there's not a short-term rental licensure, I understand, and we're not going there. That was disclosed, nothing else was disclosed at the time of the sale. We did have an appraisal. It did say the ADU was permitted and typical. I understand that was misleading and not quite factual, so that's a different issue that fell through. I did talk to Kyle Knight. He said that there hasn't been any issues with them having additional people over there with extra trash or noise. I did ask him if that came up as any issues. And it frankly would be undue hardship to turn it back into a garage. I did call prior to buying the house to make sure we could do some things. And I had a concern that that unit, that dwelling was right on the property line. So I did call and talk to Jeff because I was concerned. I wanted to make sure our neighbors or anybody around, that wouldn't be an issue just because it's basically on, well, you can tell by the setback. So we thought we did all of our due diligence. However, we can't pull any building permits or do anything. So that's why I'm here. So asking to get it approved so we can follow the rules and move forward with our house. We do live here long term. Our kids go to school at Harbor Light, so that's our plan. Questions?
Side note, then, one of the restrictions in the ROS district for 2 dwellings on one property is that it cannot be rented short-term, that it must be long-term rent.
And they did disclose that, which.
Oh, this is a special land use request, so we do need to open a public hearing and ask for comments from the public should they choose.
We would always do that. Good. And should we hear from the public on this? Do I need a motion? I never can remember that.
I'll make a motion to open this to a public meeting.
Great. Is there a second to the motion to open the public?
Second.
Barry seconds it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, public hearing is open.
I just have a question. Where is this?
Right on the corner of Lake and Hoyt.
There are 4 corners on Lake.
Northwest.
Oh, northwest corner, I'm sorry. It's, yes. It's right there across from the flower shop on the north side of the road. Kitty corner across would be the baseball fields. To the north of their property is, the old dry cleaner, which is now owned by Wallstrom.
Yeah.
To the.
That's good. That's good. We got it.
Nice recitation of Harbor Springs history. Any other input from the public?
Sounds to me like this would be a small step in the direction of affordability of housing.
Because it could be long term.
It's two dwellings on one lot. I think it's a move in the right direction.
Kathy Macho of Sergeant Street. I guess I was just curious, since the second building is right on the lot line, is that correct? Is there an issue? Any special issues with the special land use permit and changes to that? Since there's, it's in the setback?
Its location on the property is an existing nonconformity. It would limit their ability to improve the portions of that building that are outside of the setback area.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
All right, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I make a motion to close.
Is there a second?
I second that.
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing on this matter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. Planning commission members, any thoughts, questions?
I just have one question. Now, does the barn predate zoning?
Yes.
Yes,
It
it's
does
quite
predate.
old. I think it
Okay.
originally that property anecdotally, I believe was quite big and that was an actual barn.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my only question. Because I remember this going through back in 18. All the reasons we did that, I don't think anything has changed, and for the point, it seems like it's consistent with what we've been trying to do with all the other stuff we've been working on. So I don't have a problem with it.
So this is the action that the property owner in 2018 should have taken.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been the natural follow-up to the discussions we had in 2018. Instead, he sold the property.
Okay. Great. Any other questions, ideas, motions? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that the planning commission, are we okay? Any other, moving this one right along here? I can slow
Is
down
this
if you, I
something
can
that-
slow down if you want.
Is this something that we want to fix when it's sold again?
No, I think once we do this, it goes with the property.
Goes with the property.
Yeah, good question. Goes with the title.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I move that the planning commission grant the special land use for a second single-family dwelling located at 693 East Lake Street, parcel ID number 51-15-12-12-400-072 pursuant to section 50.1003. Item 1.
Finding all kinds of ways to make this meeting longer.
Could you repeat that?
All right, motion is on the table. Do we have a second for that motion?
I second that.
Only seconds it. Now let's do a roll call vote then.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Bedell,
Yes.
Barry Leskard.
Yes.
6 votes pass, motion passes.
All right.
I was trying to provide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody want to stand up for a minute? I do. Audience, feel free.
Are we leaving? We're not leaving.
No, don't leave.
We're halfway done.
Halfway.
Not even.
I don't know.
Oh, that's right. Should have put coffee on.
Switch out the box here.
No,
No, I didn't have that.
I just said stand up.
Didn't announce a break.
Okay, that's enough. Move on. The blood back to your pants, okay. I'm ready.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Let the games begin.
There's a good philosophy.
Okay, let's reconvene.
Oh, we gotta see you guys. Yeah.
He's right there.
Oh, yes, I thought you were-
You do know you're not there.
Yeah. Jeff, you didn't. You gave me the wrong one.
Oh, shoot, I'm sorry.
Nick, make it sound
That's
similar.
I apologize. Thanks, Bill.
Now we have to restart the meeting.
We have to restart the meeting.
Redo the whole meeting. Okay, let's go on to item D, special land use request 587 East Third Street headquarters. Let's go to John on this one. John, what do we need to know?
Okay. The applicant is proposing to build first, they're gonna demolish the existing garage on the site. They're gonna build a connection between the house and the new garage. And the new garage is gonna have a second floor that has a guest quarters. The issue here is that part of the breezeway connection and the new garage partially extend into the restricted bluff zone, which requires special review by the planning commission. Regarding the requirements that are in section 50.302 for guest quarters, they satisfy all of the planning related issues relative to size, height, etc. The issue here was the review on the encroachment into the bluff. And this was the second review that was done by Spicer because of the encroachment into the bluff area. We provided them a copy of all the drawings, engineering and architectural, plus provided them copies of the bluff area restriction ordinance and their details. They came out with the recommendation that, again, the project is feasible, but they noted 4 conditions that there should be provided extra information, primarily on the amount of excavation, again, foundation. They noted that the proposed ground anchors extend beyond the property boundary, which may require an easement from the adjacent property owner. So there's some conditions that they pointed out from an engineering point of view that still need to be resolved as part of the project. Again, I think we can proceed the same way that planning commission, if you want to make a recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions being satisfied prior to the issuance of the zoning permit. And those would be reviewed internally and administratively.
Okay, well, let's take this in bite-sized pieces then. Let's, if it's all right with the commission, let's talk about the guest quarters approval. So it's the concept of having guest quarters then for the property. And then let's come to the bluff encroachment. Does that make sense, John? Is that?
That's correct, yes. If you take a look at the staff paper that's in your packet, at the very end probably shows the proposed elevations for the project. And you can see the existing homes on the left, the proposed connection to the guest quarter, the new garage, and the guest quarter is on the right. The guest quarter height is less than the height of the main principal building. It doesn't exceed the percentage that's in the ordinance. And as I had mentioned, it satisfies all the other requirements that are in the code. So
for guest quarters.
For the guest quarters,
Okay.
yes. For the guest quarters.
If I could just add 2 more small points. This did also go before the zoning board of appeals. This is a very shallow lot and a large portion of this project is behind the rear yard setback line. The zoning board of appeals reviewed this and felt that they had suitable practical difficulty, and they did approve the variance to build in the area that they were in. The initial garage was located closer to the side yard line. And one of the conditions that they met was they changing that location of the garage to be farther away from that property line. They meet the side yard setback now.
And the guest quarters would be above the garage.
Guest quarters would be above the garage. So the variance that was approved was to build closer to the rear of the property regarding the setback issue. The second part is, this is a special land use request for guest quarters, so we do have to make sure to have a public hearing at some point as well.
Commissioners, any questions to John about his analysis on our key tests for guest quarters? Okay. All right, could we have a motion to open a public hearing? Guest quarters.
I make a motion to open a public hearing.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. All in favor of opening the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Public hearing's open. Anyone?
I'd like to ask a question, and it's for my own informational purposes. How does the city control the rentability of spaces above garages?
So that's a good question, and it's a difficult question. I think it depends on a couple of factors. One, we have language that states that they cannot be short-term rented. We do have a company that we work with called Harmari, or actually Avenue now. And they scrape websites like Airbnb and VRBO looking for listings to help us identify short-term rental listings to make sure that they're complying with the licensing that we have in town. The other aspect of it would be, you know, again, at the current time, they're not permitted for long-term rent either. And that's more reliant on word of mouth, complaints from other neighbors or things like that to come back to let me know that there's an issue that needs to be addressed for zoning issues.
How many words of mouth does one need?
I mean, you know, if I'm made aware of an issue, I'll look into it, and if it needs to be addressed, we'll address it. Okay.
All right, any other?
Yeah, I'll just address it. I represent the homeowner.
Okay.
My name is Steve Warner. I'm with Shoreline Architecture out of Petoskey. In fact, this is not, in Bob knows, as we went through the approval process with him on the ZBA. It's a family of 6, and essentially they just need more sleeping rooms, and they're double bunking now. So there's no intention, you know, even if that was a thought process, to be able to rent it. And as far as the engineering, I spoke with Nels today, and he did not actually receive everything. And so I thought the third-party review was with Joel O'Neill, and we worked through that, and there is an authorization by Joel that he did review all of our engineering, which was done by Performance Engineering and Doug Hula. And we came up with a solution, and once we explained the entire process to him, he did in fact approve it. I was not aware of the other one. And so then I immediately called Nels and talked to him about it. He was not aware of any of that information. And so I kind of informed him. Now I can continue that process and suffice with that information. But it has been through an engineer, a soil geotech, and then a mechanical engineer, or a civil rather. And what we're using there's an existing retaining wall. We're using all the existing foundations. We're not removing anything. We are pinning it back to the bluff. That is in how we're doing that is it's a design build approach, meaning you don't know exactly how much engineering you're going to need until you're physically applying it to the site. And so you have to reach a certain amount of anchoring and resistance. And so we're going to do that as we build it. And so when I explained that to Joel as a representative or representing the city, he understood that process. And so therefore he did approve it. I explained that to Nels today, and he didn't know that. So just a little background on what transpired today.
Okay. Is there any other public comment?
On behalf of my sister-in-law, who is the neighbor at 595, she has reviewed the documents and approves of the CBA's ruling and has no further comment about the new building. Perfectly satisfied. It meets all of the city's requirements. It's inside the property lines and setback.
Thank you very much.
Just as a member of the public, I would like to say that I think this is consistent with the discussions that you're having to revamp the code. And that it's in the best interest of the public and the town that we continue to encourage development.
Thank you very much.
Undermining the bluff.
Okay, let's keep it to the guest quarters approval right now. We keep blending the two things, so let's deal with them in order. Planning commissioners, any questions about the guest quarter?
I'll make a motion to close our public hearing.
That's an even better idea.
Yeah. Make a motion to close.
Good. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Good. We have a motion. A second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. All right, under the guest quarters, any questions about the guest quarter analysis that John did or about the use of guest quarters? Anyone care to make a motion on?
If I could just make a recommendation, we do have a letter from the neighbor above the bluff that was provided stating that they were in favor of the project and whatnot. There was a copy of an easement that was included proposed.
But that's not part of the guest quarter, right?
Never mind.
We're getting back to that in a second. Okay.
Do it all the time.
Next ups, anyone? Anyone?
Do we have language for that one?
Yeah. In my staff report.
Okay, I'm good about it. This motion to approve. Okay, I move that the planning commission approve the guest quarters at 587 East Third Street for a second story addition on a new garage per the site plan prepared by Shoreline Architecture dated 5/2/2023.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call and vote on that one. Wait, any more questions, concerns? Okay,
Roll call.
please.
We'll start with Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Emily DeBay,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Mark Benet.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, motion passes for special land use approval on this property. All right, now let's get technical. Next topic is the site plan review for building in the restricted bluffs. All right, John, you wanna,
I just, yeah,
pretty much what you said.
pretty much. I think we just need to get the fair post of permit.
My only other comment is I think that it would be appropriate that we include a condition that that easement be signed and recorded with the Register of Deeds prior to zoning approval, because the work does propose putting in work fixtures on the neighboring property owner's property.
And I thought I saw an easement.
There's a draft of an easement that was included that they've prepared. It has not been signed yet. From the letter that the neighboring property owner provided, it looks like they're not opposed to it. But I think that because they're proposing to do work that with these tie-ins, the stakes would actually be on the neighbor's property, that we should make sure that that easement is reported prior to any work being started or zoning approval for this.
All right, so let's, so how about another motion to open up?
Well, we don't need a public hearing.
We don't need a public hearing
Take
for this.
Oh, so not a special land use approval?
a site plan.
Site plan review.
Site plan approval. You can take public comment,
I
but
always would.
public hearing is required.
Great, go ahead, public hearing. How about public comment? Are you? Would you care to open up public comment?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Bill Brown.
In conversation, the reason for the necessity of tiebacks on the existing wall is to stop erosion of the bluff. The property owner above has since clear cut that area of the bluff. And now these people are obliged to go ahead and spend more money to ensure the fact that the retaining wall doesn't collapse. And that retaining wall and the subsequent property also goes behind my sister-in-law. They also didn't pick up anything. And now with not a lot of rain this summer, the trees are walking their way down the bluff. In addition to a viewing platform, which is hidden if you're on a bluff drive, and it's falling apart and coming down the bluff. And yet nothing seems to catch anybody's interest unless you happen to live.
Okay. Thank you. Still processing all that?
You don't have to process, just go and look.
Okay.
It's a picture, it's clear as day.
If I can just for a moment, add on to a little bit with our conversation Jeff and I had about, they did sign a letter, as you guys see, it's very informal. We did inform them of what we wanted to do. She was, Tom and Camilla Weatham, they were very much behind what we were doing. And we didn't prepare it in an official document. And so when I did do that, I sent it to Jeff to review and said, would this suffice? And he thought it would be great. But let's have you guys, share some information if you have any concerns. And then we would modify it accordingly if we didn't. It's pretty extensive. But there won't be any difficulty in getting them to endorse it. They were very much behind, much like what Bob or Bill just said, in the sense that we got to stabilize that bluff at all costs. you know, my client's making a big investment. They're investing a lot into this retaining.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Any other public input on this one? All right, let's close the public input then. And planning commissioners? What do you think about a technical solution?
Nancy on Zoom.
Oh, Nancy's on Zoom.
Yep.
Okay. I just have a question about the easement and what Jeff said. Typically, the city doesn't get involved at all in easements. Am I right? They aren't even actually shown on some of the, some of the maps of the city. So is that something that we really want to get involved in and making sure that there is an easement between these two neighbors?
If they don't have the easement, they can't do the project.
If they don't have the easement, then they can't do the work. Yeah, I mean, it's not our, I guess the question is, or my thought is, it's not our responsibility to enforce an easement. So if there's an easement between two property owners, Bill, I give you as my neighbor the right to use a portion of my property. The city has no involvement in the enforcement of that. Sometimes we might not even be aware of that easement, depending on how it's recorded or if it's recorded. But I think it is important that if we're going to approve a plan to do something and it involves work on a neighbor's property, we need to make sure that that neighbor is involved and understands what's happening. And an easement provides us that knowledge, that they are aware that the neighbor is going to be doing this work and that it will involve some work on their property.
I think that makes sense. The technical solution depends on access and ability to use that property.
Steve, I have a question for you on your sheet A 1.2. Which is the one after, scroll down on that one, please.
This one right here.
No, it's the
A1.2.
main level floor plan.
Oh.
You're looking at 1.1.
I have a 1.1.
Oh, 1.1.
Oh, mine's labeled differently. Yeah, that one right there is.
Peter's getting tired too.
Is this is the existing retaining wall?
It actually, what's going on, yes, that portion is an existing retaining wall.
So
And then the garage is actually retained.
Okay, so right there's a retaining wall too. Okay,
And so
so that's what we're building over is this one.
What's that?
Are you building over this one or that?
We're actually, both are staying in position.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to disrupt anything.
Right, I understand.
And so the soil nails are going to be driven into the soil through both of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they in fact do obviously reach into the neighboring property.
Okay, so. Okay. Now my eyes are getting bad. Good thing I can zoom in. I won't blind anybody, I promise. So, okay, so your section, so the section you have on A 2.1.
Yeah.
That's the existing garage wall, the extension of that.
We provided a section through, where's the,
Yeah.
the nails?
I want to make sure I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's
the
yeah,
elevation.
exactly. It's like a 16-inch thick wall on the backside of the garage.
Okay,
And the remaining portion of that foundation is staying in position to the east.
okay.
Because we just don't want to risk it.
Yeah, no, I applaud you for not tearing that stuff out, because if you do, you open up a can of worms.
Oh, yeah.
So,
You don't know. Yeah, so.
no, I get it, I just want to make sure I understood it. Oh, good job.
All right, planning commission, does anybody have any concerns with the technical solution that they're proposing here? That would make you question this project? Or we believe the experts? All right.
I don't know how come there was just a bunch of people here that were concerned about that, weren't concerned about the bluff. And are willing to cut down trees, and now there's a bunch of people in here that are concerned about the bluff.
It's a matter of who's opposite.
Think up your minds.
Bluff, the bluff, the bluff. It's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Delivery.
Whole meeting.
Yeah, the whole meeting. Pretty interesting. All right. This is the site plan review. Any other questions, concerns? Someone care to make a motion?
I can make a motion. Do you have any language on this?
No, I would suggest that you approve the site plan with the following conditions,
Right.
that the easement get executed. And that the final plans be reviewed by the third-party engineer. Prior to issuance of a permit.
I move that we approve the site plan with the conditions that the easement gets approved and that the third party review the engineering per Spicer's points 1, 2, 3, and 4, unless they're taken care of beforehand.
I'm just gonna provide everything that Joel and Neil did, so, which is exactly almost all.
Okay. Is that good?
Mark's made a motion with some conditions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call.
Start with Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Dubay,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, that was the site plan review. Thank you for taking us through that so patiently and thoroughly. We appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bills in the mail.
All right, last thing on the agenda, other than our, just some brief discussion afterward, is a concept. And the concept has could have application in our zoning code review project. And the concept that we're being asked to think about tonight is called a flag lot. And Jeff or John, who would like to tell us about what a flag lot is and what it would be used for?
So we've got some drawings up there on the screen. The idea of a flag lot, let's say that one property owner has excessive depth to their property and they have enough width that they can give some away or sell some, that they would be able to split off a portion of their property that has minimal frontage on the street and just a narrow space for a driveway, which would be the flag pole that would open up into a larger lot directly behind them that would be suitable to, have another structure, build another single family home separate from and be sold separately from the house in front.
So it would be a lot split.
It would be a lot split. The changes that we would need to look at if we wanted to make something like this viable would be looking at, I think one of the things that is sometimes referred to in this is when determining the width of the lot, you would ignore the portion that is the flag pole, and you would look at the width of the lot that they're creating behind. The other aspect of the zoning code we would need to look at changing. Right now, we have language that states that the minimum amount of frontage on a street for a lot is no less than 50, regardless of the width. And that would be something that we would need to change.
If we like this.
If we like this concept. So there are benefits and drawbacks. And I think that John has put together a great memo on this, providing some of that, or John Leo, I should say. One potential concern is emergency services. Emergency services have sometimes found these flag lots and these homes behind other homes difficult to find. And that it has been seen to cause a delay in emergency services providing those services to those properties. That can be offset by proper signage, showing where these are. Another potential concern is shared drive access, whether you're going to permit them to have easement access to the street or that they would have to specifically own to get to the street are some things to consider. The benefit is it can provide you with ways to very easily create infill. Right, right now with our zoning code, they might have to combine multiple parcels to create a larger piece of property where they would then be able to put in a road of their own to access and create the lots similar to the Claridge Court property that we had saw earlier. Being able to do a flag lot can provide you a simpler, quicker path to approval where you could do something. It just has those limitations. They, some other things that I've seen, because they lack the frontage on the street, they sometimes have a lower value, which can be a benefit or a drawback depending on what you're trying to create. Those are just some thoughts that I had, and we did have those pictures to kind of illustrate what's being proposed. I thought that this was something that, you know, should probably come to the planning commission for a good discussion.
So we're not looking for anything approved or no concrete proposal on the table. The subcommittee that's working on zoning would just like your reactions to this. Is it worth considering as an idea and bringing back as part of the whole package?
We have Tony Johnson with his hand raised.
Great.
We just gave somebody permission to do this.
That's right.
We just gave somebody permission to do this. On Lake Street. That's a huge flag lot.
With the Claridge Court property that we did earlier, that's a little bit different because they actually created a road that's providing access to multiple homes. This would be a little bit different where it would just be a driveway going to one specific home.
Yeah, that would be one of my concerns. I sort of like the concept of flag lots, but I have two concerns. One is that there's a limit to number of residences achieved, because you have one lot, and then you could have an accessory dwelling unit with that, so that's two. And so like, where do you stop the flag, the development of that flag lot? And then there has to be, in my opinion, enough vehicle circulation so that you don't have cars backing out onto the street. They have to be able to turn around and come out the correct way. You know, because sometimes flag lots, they really squeeze them in, and it's very narrow, and I've seen them in other cities, and I think there can be dangerous if they're not done correctly.
I think there are gonna be minimal lots that have the size to be able to do this in the city of Carver Springs.
That's a good point. There's not that many of them,
Right.
but it is also consistent with our desire to increase housing
absolutely.
opportunity, obviously. So it's an interesting concept. I like it.
Tony.
Yeah, let's go to Tony here. Tony?
Just a clarification, if I can, not sure what page you have on the screen. I'm looking at, so I'm looking at one that has a flag lot shown in a kind of a red shading with the front lot at the front of facing the street. Just want to clarify, would minimum lot size and setbacks still be applied to that front lot, the existing portion of the original lot?
Yeah. Yes, all lots would have to meet their zoning requirements with their setbacks, with their size.
So the front setback would be the one towards the closest to the street.
Yeah, you could not create a flag lot, which then creates a non-conformity for the primary house.
Yeah, but as far as which ones are designated, the front lot, the front setback is still the one towards the street, and all the other definitions. Yeah. And there's very few lots in Harbor that can do that.
Nancy?
I agree with what Mark said, that, if one of our priorities is to create more opportunity for housing, preferably some more affordable housing, and to give people more options with their lots by lowering lot size or house size, I think this definitely warrants discussion, and I would be in favor of it. There, as you said, there aren't a whole lot of lots that can do it, but even if there are some, we're giving people more options.
Okay. So I'd like to,
Okay.
shall we get some public input on this, just as long as we're all here together? All right, great.
Kathy Montel, I guess I was wondering, aren't there examples of flag lots on Mitchell Street as you're going into Petoskey? From like the division corner in towards town? It seems to me there are some of the driveways that are between
There are.
Mitchell and the Winter Sports
I
Park.
just sold 3 of them right there at the river. There was a flag lot, 3 homes,
So I mean,
on either side.
those have been there for quite a while. I don't know, but that might be an example of something to look at to see. I don't think I've ever seen cars backing out of that, so they must have, must be dealing with that part that you were talking about. That might be an example of something to look at.
So one of my questions would be, to some of the counters to flag lots would be, a lot of those, I guess, are, problems in theory, like, emergency services. Like, has there actually been, communities, John, or anyone that knows of that have actually had problems with them?
Well, when we first talked about flag lots, first thing that came to my mind is the concept of flag lots on inland lakes, where they use the flag lot, so everybody has a piece of frontage on the lake. And that was one of the reasons why they took some actions on the, when they revised the lot division. In order to really prevent that from happening. But you can find these, you have to really look hard for them, but you can find these in built communities, this concept of flag lots.
I think the county allows them.
Does Tony have another comment?
I don't know if his hand just didn't go back down.
Yes, John Leo.
Just for reference, I did talk to the police chief and the fire chief about this, and neither one of them had a real concern, given the ability to do this in a limited number of lots in the city. They were both fine with it.
Victor, did I hear you say that there would also be an option for an easement for the drive rather than a complete,
I did not say,
sale of part of that?
I did not say that, but
I made that comment, and that would really be up to whatever, as we decide how we want to regulate flag lots, would be a decision that would need to be made. Some communities allow the flagpole to be just an easement across the property in front of them. You see that more typically, I think, in rural communities with larger parcels. And it may be.
That would preserve the street frontage of the front lot.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be something, I mean, obviously, if this is a path that the planning commission would like to pursue, we would need to potentially modify some of our regulations to take this into consideration to figure out how we would regulate them appropriately.
so in practice, it's the same. There's a different mechanism to get to it, but in practice, you have a road, whether it's an easement or a flag lot, you have a road.
Right.
So I guess, if there's something we want to do, how cumbersome do we want to make the process? If there's only a few lots for it. So I mean, that's one question. And there are examples, and when you go up White Road, one of the properties we're looking at for the substation, there's a road, an easement that leads to the back, the landlocked parcel. And it's the same concept. They have an easement to get there, but it's just not a separate lot.
And could that become a shared driveway?
It's possible. I mean, right.
Another thing to be cognizant of is the more houses you have on a shared driveway, you quickly hit the point where, and I believe Emmett County, it's if there's 3 houses on the same shared drive, that shared drive is no longer a driveway, it's a road that you name. And it changes things. So that would be another thing that we would have to take into consideration. There different standards would have to apply at that point.
Would that county standard apply in the city?
We do our own 911 addressing, but generally we work with the same regulations and try and keep the safety standards that the county does.
If it has to become a road, who then has jurisdiction over the road and responsibility?
It would become a private road that those property owners would have to maintain on their own. But it would be given a name, and then those properties would be addressed off of that as opposed to being addressed off the primary road that they're on.
Which makes sense.
Okay, all right. All right, any more comments from the public? You've been so kind to hang in with us tonight. All right, back to the commissioners. I guess I would just ask, is this concept promising enough that you want the zoning subcommittee to consider it? Just give me a nod or a shake of the,
Yeah.
okay, yes, yes.
Sure, why not?
Sure. Okay, that's good. That's all we're looking for.
Or you
tonight.
get more smaller houses.
Yep, yeah, good. All right, that closes that topic. Now we're into member comments. I have just a super quick update on the activities last week regarding zoning. Anyone else have a topic or?
I do, so about the CIP, but if you, I don't know if you want me to go first or.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, so I did email everyone a draft copy of the capital improvements plan. One of the requests from previous years was that we wanted to get well in advance to have time to review it because it is a 24-page document. So I provide that to you in email. It's also on the website. Please take the time to review that, see if there's any, we went through the process, city staff and the policy team to score those and to do our best to get cost estimates and put them in which year we project we need to do those projects. Now it's the planning commission's turn per the state statute to review that and make sure it conforms with the master plan, as well as to provide any guidance to other projects you would like to see, or if you feel some projects are more important than other projects. And then that gets approved here and then it goes to council. We review it at council and then we adopt it along with the budget in December. So just please take your time and have questions or concerns. And it's just a draft working document.
And that'll be on next month.
It'll be on November's agenda, yeah.
Great. Good. Okay, last thing then is I just want to give everybody a quick update on the activities from last week regarding the zoning subcommittee. We held 3 open houses for the public to come in and view the 11 storyboards that we put together about the update. And people were very complimentary about the storyboards that felt they were clear and informative. And I'd say we probably had 20 some people come over the 3 sessions that we had. And Jeff concurs, there were about 20 people who came. And that was good. And then we had kind of a that says that we're being proactive and anticipating what residents are going to need in the future. And we looked at the demographics and the wave of aging that is upon us and the thoughts that we could offer some additional choices to property owners. So it was well received and the presentation is getting tighter and tighter. So it'll be useful as we tell the story going forward. On we go. Next meeting of the zoning subcommittee is on November 2nd. It's a work session. We'll continue to keep everybody informed. That's all I have. Any other topics? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Next meeting, November 16th.
November 16th.
I know, it seems like that's the last thing.